It is 2 in the morning. The world outside your window is perfectly quiet. Yet inside your mind, a deafening storm is raging. You are lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling, completely physically exhausted, but neurologically entirely awake. Your mind is racing at a terrifying speed. You are dissecting a seemingly harmless conversation from 3 years ago, agonizing over a single misplaced word. Or perhaps you are projecting your mind far into the future, attempting to meticulously predict and plan for a hypothetical crisis that has not happened yet, and mathematically is highly unlikely to ever occur. If you pay close attention to your physical body in this moment, you will notice that your heart rate is slightly elevated. Your breathing is shallow, trapped in the upper fraction of your chest. The muscles in your jaw are tight, and your shoulders feel pulled upward toward your ears. Your entire biological system feels tightly coiled, like a mechanical spring locked under immense, invisible pressure. And in this exact moment, as you lie there in the dark, you feel absolutely, fundamentally convinced that if you just think about this problem hard enough, if you can just view the scenario from one more analytical angle, or trace the logic tree down to its absolute final branch, you will finally find the solution. You believe that you can engineer your way out of anxiety. You believe that thinking is the cure for the panic. But you are not actually solving a problem. You are simply reinforcing a neural pathway of anxiety. In the realm of cognitive behavioral psychology, this endless, repetitive, and deeply exhausting cognitive loop is known as rumination. Rumination is not productive problem solving. It is the mind's desperate, panicked attempt to endlessly analyze a perceived threat until it feels a sense of safety. But the tragic irony of overthinking is that instead of untangling the mental knot, the continuous, frantic application of thought only pulls the knot tighter. The more you analyze the feeling of anxiety, the deeper the neural groove becomes. And the heavier the thoughts become inside your head, the heavier you begin to feel physically. The grand, convincing deception of overthinking is that it feels remarkably, identically like productive work. You genuinely believe that by mapping out every possible catastrophe, by exploring every worst-case scenario and preparing a defense for it, you are actively protecting yourself from harm. You feel like an investigator trying to crack the case of your own psychological discomfort. But logic cannot resolve a biological alarm. When you overthink a feeling of panic, you are not finding the exit. You are simply building a highly detailed, incredibly complex map of a prison you are already trapped inside. So, why does the brain do this? Why does an organ so incredibly advanced, the most complex structure in the known universe, routinely mistake exhausting, circular panic for necessary productivity? To understand this, we have to look away from the content of the thoughts themselves. We have to stop looking at the anxieties, the fears, and the hypothetical scenarios, and look instead at the physical, biological machine that is generating them. When faced with psychological stress, the highly evolved human brain instinctively attempts to use logic and analysis like a multi-tool. But anxiety, at its core, is not a mechanical failure of your logic. It is not a sign that you are not smart enough to figure out the answer. Anxiety is a physiological state. It is a physical alarm bell sounding deep inside the architecture of the body. So, if obsessive thinking is exactly what created the cognitive loop in the first place, why do we fundamentally, almost stubbornly believe that more thinking is the only way out? To understand why we get trapped in these exhausting cycles, we must first look at what the human brain does when it is, supposedly, doing absolutely nothing. For a long time in the history of neuroscience, researchers naturally believed that when we rested, when we closed our eyes and stopped interacting with the world, our brains powered down, much like a computer going into sleep mode. But modern neuroimaging, particularly functional MRI scans, has revealed the exact opposite to be true. When you are not actively focused on a specific external task in the outside world, like reading a complex book, holding a focused conversation with a friend, or solving a mathematical puzzle,
Is there no end to this?
Your brain does not go dark. Instead, it shifts its massive energy consumption. It activates a highly complex, deeply interconnected web of neural regions known as the default mode network, or the DMN. The default mode network is, essentially, your brain's supreme internal simulator. It is the neurological architecture responsible for daydreaming, self-reflection, and what neuroscientists call mental time travel. In a healthy, calm, and regulated state, the default mode network is a phenomenal evolutionary tool. It is the very mechanism that allowed early humans to survive and dominate their environment. It allows you to effortlessly pull vast amounts of data and lessons from your past experiences and seamlessly project those lessons forward to predict and plan for your future. It is the network where your sense of self and identity lives. It is the birthplace of human creativity, empathy, and theory of mind. It allows you to imagine what another person might be feeling or what the world might look like tomorrow. But this incredibly powerful, highly active simulator has a critical, fundamental vulnerability. When your autonomic nervous system detects a threat, and to the primitive parts of your brain, that threat could be a literal physical predator, an impending project deadline at work, a looming financial crisis, or just a lingering, vague feeling of social rejection. It initiates a cascade of biological responses. It floods your bloodstream and your brain with powerful stress hormones. Cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine spike immediately. And in this heightened, chemically altered state of physiological arousal, the stress response completely and aggressively hijacks the simulator. Under the influence of cortisol, the default mode network is no longer casually exploring the past with nostalgia or peacefully planning the future with optimism. It becomes hyper-focused, rigid, and locked onto the perceived threat. It desperately tries to solve a feeling of profound biological danger using the only tool it has evolved to use: thought. And that is exactly how rumination is born. The simulator is running at absolute maximum capacity, continuously generating worst-case scenarios, running endless diagnostic checks on your life, trying to find a logical, intellectual exit to a purely biological emergency. Fortunately for us, the default mode network is not the only operating system in your brain. When you direct your attention outward, away from your internal narrative, and toward a specific, concrete, physical task in the present moment, your brain executes a massive shift in blood flow and electrical activity. It activates an entirely different neural pathway known as the task-positive network, or the TPN. If the default mode network is the grand internal simulator, the task-positive network is the heavy biological anchor. It is the sensory processing system that engages with the right here and the right now. It is the network that lights up when you catch a falling glass, when you feel the cold wind on your skin, or when you carefully listen to the exact tone of a musical instrument. And this leads us to the single most important neurological discovery regarding the treatment of overthinking and rumination. These two networks, the simulator and the anchor, the DMN and the TPN, are strictly anti-correlated. This means, by the strict laws of human biology, they cannot be fully active at the exact same time. They operate like a mechanical, neurological seesaw. When one side goes up, the other side must biologically, inevitably, go down. This is an evolutionary design. If an early human was foraging for berries and suddenly heard the snap of a twig nearby, they needed absolute, total sensory processing to detect the predator. They could not afford to be daydreaming about an argument they had yesterday while a tiger was approaching. Thus, the brain was hardwired to shut down the internal simulator whenever intense external sensory processing was required. The human brain, for all of its breathtaking processing power, has a strict biological bandwidth limit. It simply cannot process high-definition sensory data from the physical world while simultaneously running a deep, complex, emotionally draining internal simulation. When you focus the entire weight of your attention on the rough texture of a cold cup in your hands, or the ambient, rhythmic sound of a distant car driving by on wet pavement, or the heavy, undeniable physical weight of your feet resting flat on the floorboard, you forcefully starve the default mode network of its electrical energy. Brain scans of individuals actively engaged in somatic grounding, mindfulness, and sensory focus reveal this stunning transition in real time. During periods of heavy, depressive rumination, the midline structures of the default mode network light up on an fMRI with aggressive hyperactivity. The mind is literally trapped in an echo chamber of its own design. reinforcing the very neural pathways of the anxiety it is desperately trying to escape. But the moment the individual intentionally grounds themselves in their physical senses, the scan completely and dramatically shifts. The hyperactive, pulsing energy literally leaves the internal loop and floods outward into the sensory and motor cortices. The internal alarm is abruptly deprived of its power source. But if the science is this clear, if stepping out of the mind and into the physical body is the definitive biological answer, why is it so incredibly, sometimes impossibly difficult to do in the moment? Why do we actively resist letting go of the worry? Because the default mode network, when fueled by stress, is uniquely and terrifyingly persuasive. It utilizes a powerful psychological trap known as emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is a cognitive distortion where you believe that because you feel a certain way, it must represent the objective truth. It convinces you that it holds the final, critical missing piece to your safety. When you try to let go of the rumination and ground yourself, the hijacked simulator whispers to you in the dark. If you stop analyzing this problem right now, if you drop your guard for even 1 second, you will be utterly unprepared. You will be vulnerable. You will be in danger. This is the ultimate illusion of control. Human beings crave certainty above almost anything else. We would rather suffer the agonizing pain of continuous, exhausting overthinking than face the terrifying, empty void of uncertainty. We use worry as a magical talisman, subconsciously believing that the act of worrying itself prevents the bad thing from happening. Your mind is incredibly intelligent, but in this state of high sympathetic stress, it is making a fundamental, critical error in logic. The brain is a meaning-making machine. It assumes that because the body's alarm is ringing, because your chest is tight, your palms are sweating, and your stomach is in knots, there must be a highly complex, extremely dangerous logical problem that you need to solve right this second. But most of the time, the alarm is just an echo of physiological exhaustion. It is a severe lack of quality sleep. It is too much caffeine on an empty stomach. It is a passing wave of stress from a long, overstimulating day at work. The gear of your mind is spinning furiously in a total vacuum, completely and utterly disconnected from the actual physical alarm bell ringing in your autonomic nervous system. You are trying to put out a fire in the software when it is the physical hardware that is simply overheating. To break the illusion, you must stop talking to the mind, and you must begin speaking to the body in its own biological language. You cannot successfully debate with an overactive nervous system. You cannot outlogic adrenaline. You must manually override it. One of the fastest, most scientifically reliable, and biologically direct ways to do this is through a breathing technique known as the physiological sigh. This specific, intentional breathing pattern bypasses your conscious thought and directly engages the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the massive biological superhighway, the wandering nerve that physically connects your brainstem down through your neck, directly into your heart, your lungs, and your gut. The physiological sigh requires 2 sharp, deliberate inhales through the nose. The first inhale fills the lungs almost to capacity. The second, shorter inhale forcefully pops open the tiny, collapsed air sacs in your lungs called alveoli. This is immediately followed by a long, slow, complete, and unhurried exhale through the mouth. This simple, mechanical, physical action achieves what hours of overthinking never could. It actively offloads a massive amount of carbon dioxide from the bloodstream. It physically slows the beating of the heart, and it manually overrides the sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response, forcefully sending a potent chemical signal of profound safety back up the vagus nerve to the brainstem. It tells the default mode network, undeniably, that the emergency is over. We spend so much of our waking lives and so many of our sleepless nights desperately trying to figure out the perfect, bulletproof answer to our anxieties. We fold our thoughts into endless, impossible, complicated loops, believing that one day, if we just think hard enough, we will finally crack the code to our own peace of mind. We treat ourselves like puzzles that need to be solved. But true peace is not found by finally untangling the endless loop. You will never find the perfect thought that cures the fear of having thoughts. Peace is realized when you deeply, biologically understand that the loop is just a reflex. It is just a neurological echo of a tired body. It is nothing more than paper folding in the dark, casting shadows on the wall of your mind. You do not have to untangle it at all. You can simply take a breath and set it down.